So, those of you who have drilled down deep, gone into the rabbit hole of my channel, you may have noticed that I have a playlist called something to the effect of book recommendations. And one of the recommendations that I made in there was of a book called A Chime of Windbells and subtitled A Year of Japanese Haiku in English Verse. And the translations in here were done by Harold Stewart. It's just a beautiful book. See if I can put it in front of the camera here for you. Beautiful hardcover. It's still available, I think. And within it, there are a variety of drawings, as well as the first half of it consists of haiku by various Japanese haiku poets. And the thing of it is, I bring it to your attention now and I engage in some musings about it because it was instrumental. It was copyrighted, I think, in 1969, and it was instrumental in my evolution towards specifically Pure Land Buddhism, and more specifically Jodo Shinshu, or Shinran's version of Pure Land Buddhism. It helped me understand. Harold Stewart's descriptions really did benefit me. There were a lot of things that benefited me, including, again, I've mentioned Lucille, the elderly woman that was living in my home community back in 1979 when I had my spiritual awakening experience. She was a Pure Land Buddhist. She did paintings of Amida Buddha, and she and her housemate were very devout. And I think she had actually traveled to Japan. And when she passed away, she willed to me a couple of very small Buddha statues that I treasure to this day. Those were some of the first pieces of Buddhist art that I ever owned. But anyway, Harold Stewart, again, with these haiku and then with his explanations, was very, very helpful to me. And it occurs to me to mention, too, that I believe, yes, in the BDK America version of the Three Pure Land Sutras, which was published in 2003, it included, of course, the three major scriptures within Jodo Shinshu, which are the larger sutra on Amitayus, the sutra on contemplation of Amitayus, and the smaller sutra on Amitayus. In any case, these were translated from the Chinese by Hisao Inagaki, but it was in collaboration with Harold Stewart. So he had a direct hand in helping to bring forward these Pure Land scriptures to the English-speaking world. Anyhow, I want to share a few excerpts from this Chime of Windbells that was so meaningful to me back in the day. And this is from that book, pages 202 to 205, where Harold Stewart explains, in Pure Land Buddhism, Amida, the Japanese form of Amitabha or Amitayus, becomes the one and only Buddha of infinite light and eternal life, all other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas exemplifying his various attributes and virtues. And he capitalizes one and only, because for us Shin Buddhists, Amida Buddha is the one and only in a sense. I don't want to imply here that Shin Buddhism is monotheistic, by no means, because ultimately Amida is formless, and Shin Buddhism relies upon the basic groundwork of Mahayana Buddhism, which emphasizes non-duality and the fact that no doctrine or concepts can fully characterize the nature of true reality. But the way we think about things is that Amida is the main focal point for our devotion, and all the other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, in a sense, are emanations from him. Now, that is a uniquely Shin Buddhist perspective because, as I've said before, other kinds of Buddhism, other schools of Buddhism, put an emphasis on perhaps a different Buddha, such as Vairocana being emphasized within Shingon or esoteric Buddhism. In any case, he again says that all other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas basically exemplify Amida's attributes and virtues. And of course, the two main attributes and virtues within Buddhism, kind of as I would think of it at the level of Sambhogakaya, or the spiritual body level, the bliss body, are wisdom and compassion. Those are the two, if you want to boil it down to two simple statements or words or attributes or virtues, it's wisdom and compassion. Wisdom, that is the awareness of prajna, or the fact that ultimately no entity, no being, no thing has a totally independent existence. And what that leads us to is a sense that we are all interconnected in some mysterious way with each other. And if that's the case, again, how can I focus only on my own self, my own salvation, my own enlightenment? How can I get on the small boat to get me across the shore to the other shore of nirvana or enlightenment, and leave everybody else behind? It doesn't make any sense. So the wisdom actually, to my mind, leads to the compassion, which results in the kinds of bodhisattva vows and sacrifices that we read about in the various sutras. So he gives an example of this idea of the other Buddhas and bodhisattvas exemplifying Amida's attributes and virtues. He says, for example, his two attendant bodhisattvas, Mahastama Pramta or Saishi, and Avalokiteshvara or Kanan, embody his wisdom and compassion respectively, and with him form a triad. So here Stewart is pointing to the wisdom and compassion. I think you don't have to delve too long into my channel to realize how much I really appreciate and am inspired by Buddhist art. And of course, much of that art is related to showing pictures of Buddhas, which at the beginning, of course, at the beginning of Buddhism, that was kind of verboten. That was a no-no. So I think the first thing they actually did in terms of art was like a footprint of the Buddha. But in any case, as Buddhism developed, and as other religions develop, I mean, artists get inspired. They get inspired to create images related to the doctrines. And again, when we see Amida Buddha, very often it is in the form of a triad with two primary, what I think of as cosmic bodhisattvas flanking him, which would be Mahastama Pramta representing wisdom, and Avalokiteshvara representing infinite compassion. Avalokiteshvara being the regarder of the cries of the world. And for that I refer you to chapter 25 of the Lotus Sutra, where we hear about the virtues and attributes of that particular cosmic bodhisattva. So Mahastama Pramta in Japanese would be Saishi, and Avalokiteshvara in Japanese would be Kanan. In Chinese, Avalokiteshvara would be Kuan Yin or Guanyin. And this is where Avalokiteshvara evolved from the initial form in the Lotus Sutra as a male into a female form. And sometimes you can see the ceramic statues of Kuan Yin, even in furniture stores or antique stores in the United States. And she, I think, is sometimes referred to as the goddess of the East. There are books, by the way, about Kuan Yin and the iconography of her image. So they form a triad. Amida represents the Buddha in his Sambhogakaya, or body of recompense. And that's maybe that's where I got the idea, but that is the way I think of it. Why do I think of it that way? Well, because whenever we start talking about a Buddha with particular attributes, we're getting into the realm of concepts. And there are some beautiful, wonderful, wonderful concepts. But the nature of ultimate reality is free of concepts. It's beyond concepts. And that's where we get into the Dharmakaya, or the law body, or the truth body of Buddha. In other words, the Buddha, the Trikaya doctrine, or three-body doctrine, is such that, it's the Dharmakaya that's the ultimate Buddha body, that's beyond all words and concepts. And the way I think of it is the Sambhogakaya and Nirmanakaya, namely the bliss body and the form body, they are emanations from the Dharmakaya. So again, he, as do I, view Amida as representing the Buddha in his Sambhogakaya, or how he's translating it is body of recompense, in which he enjoys the blissful fruits of the fulfillment of his vows. And of course, Amida, the whole point of the larger sutra is, and that would be the larger sutra on Amitayus, which is the primary scripture of Shin Buddhism and is the true teaching, according to Master Shinran, that within that sutra that Dharmakara Bodhisattva expresses his 48 vows to the Buddha Lokesvara Raja, and eventually, by fulfilling all the requirements associated with those vows, he becomes Amida Buddha. So, in any case, Stewart goes on to say that Shakyamuni, which is the historical Buddha, is his, namely Amida's, Nirmanakaya, or accommodated body, or what sometimes we refer to as the form body, who, incarnating in a form suited to human comprehension, brought the name and vows of Amida to this world. And the name with a capital N is Namo Amida Butsu, or whatever phrase is associated with that sense of entrustment and refuge in Amida Buddha. When I first got turned on to Pure Land Buddhism, again at the time when I was first exposed to Stewart and to Lucille and to other aspects that brought me to the Pure Land, I would say, Nama Tathagata, Nama Tathagata, Nama Tathagata. Meaning, again, I take refuge in the Tathagata, which is the Buddha. But, in the Shin school, we say Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. And that can be shortened. You hear them say Namandaps, Namandaps. And they're actually, I think, saying Namandap Butsu, Namandap Butsu. But it really comes out Namandaps, Namandaps. And at the end of many of my videos, I'll go Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Any of these iterations, and I get comments on my channel on my different videos of people from Vietnam or China. China is Namo Amitofu, Amitofu. I can't pronounce the Vietnamese version, but every language has their own version of the name. So again, Shakyamuni, he incarnated in a form suited to human comprehension and brought the name and vows of Amida to this world by preaching the 3 sutras, which I referred to earlier, the most primary of which is the larger sutra, which contains the 48 vows, within which is the 18th vow. That's the most important one to our Jodo Shinshu tradition. As for the Dharmakaya, which you heard me talking about a minute ago, that can be fully realized only after hearing the teaching of Amida in the Pure Land, and so attaining enlightenment. So the implication being, from Stewart's point of view, we die, we're reborn in the Pure Land, and at that point we can realize the Dharmakaya and the true nature of ultimate reality. Shinran would say, why? Because we become a Buddha immediately. According to the mythological account given in the larger Pure Land Sutra, Amida, while he was still the Bodhisattva Dharmakara, or Hozo Bosatsu, which is what it is in Japanese, he made 48 vows before the Buddha Lokesvara Raja that he would establish a Pure Land embodying the best qualities of all other Buddha fields, to be called Sukhavati, or the land of highest happiness, and to be situated in the western quarter of the universe. That's the essence of what I have come to refer to as the mythopoetic narrative associated with our Shin Buddhist belief system. By practicing an ascesis, I'm not sure what that means, an ascesis of the 6 paramita for incalculable lengths of time, he became the Buddha Amitabha, and has already, 10 kalpas or eons ago, fulfilled his vows to save all beings by the illimitable stock of merit which he has accumulated. The way I think of it is, again, for eons and eons of time, Dharmakara exercised Buddhist practices. And what Stewart is pointing to, of course, are the 6 paramitas, which are the main practices of the Bodhisattva, the 6 perfections. You can look those up. They're very important. They are analogous in Mahayana Buddhism to the Four Noble Truths, or the Eightfold Path of the earlier form of Buddhism, Theravada school. And the way I think about it is that by virtue of this massive amount of practice, he accumulated all this merit. And there's the idea of merit accumulation in Buddhism. We Shin Buddhists don't do things in order to accumulate merit because we don't feel capable of doing it. But Dharmakara was an exceptional kind of, actually he was a bhikshu, I should say. I don't think he was a bodhisattva at that time. But in any case, he practiced, accumulated all this merit. And the way I think of it is, it's because he had all that merit that he had the ability to create this pure land, this most wonderful of all Buddha fields. And the way he saves us, as I would think about it, is he's able to transfer some of that merit to us. He can transfer some of that merit to me, John, because my karma is so negative as a result of all the negative aspects of thoughts and behaviors that I have engaged in over the course of time, that it would take me lifetimes and lifetimes to clean it all up and ultimately attain nirvana. But by virtue of him transferring some of his merit to me, it gives me assurance that I can be free of all this negative karma at the time of my death, at which point I can become a Buddha. I can become a Buddha. I can become fully enlightened. And at that point, according to Shin doctrine, I have the capability of opting to come back to this world as a bodhisattva or in many other forms in order to help beings through compassionate activities that I am unable to engage in this life, being filled with blind passions as I am now, filled with anger, filled with greed, filled with ignorance. So this is the narrative. In any case, I'm getting a bit long-winded here. And so I think what I'd like to do, I may come back to Stewart another time and share more from these pages, but what I'd like to do right now is just to close with a couple of the haiku, the brilliant haiku that are in the earlier part of this book. And so here we have the one that says, "A butterfly on the gilded lotus flower hears of rebirth through Amitabha's power." Hearing, when you talk about what is the practice within Shin Buddhism, I may do another musing on the idea that we really have no practice. But when we say, well, what is our practice? Well, it's not to fulfill the Eightfold Path. It's not to fulfill the 6 paramitas or to practice the 6 paramitas. What it is hearing. Hearing is the key thing that we're to do. And what do we hear? We hear of rebirth through Amitabha's power. Amitabha being the Buddha of infinite light. Amitayus, the Buddha of infinite life. Light implying wisdom, life implying compassion. Here's another. "Simply have faith. Let all attachments go. Do not blossom, scatter even so." So again, the relationship between us and nature, us and the world of nature, of which we are a part. My sweetheart just bought me a book from the grocery store, magazine, I should say, on apes. What's the story with apes? Because I'm kind of fascinated by apes. It gives me a sense of connectedness with my heritage going back millions of years. And it really helps humble me when I realize, how could I in this life presume to be able to know everything or to be able to accomplish complete enlightenment, given the limitations of my human form and my negative karma. But by simply having faith, simply entrusting in Amida and his vow, I can be who I am, which is, again, on the positive side, just simply a part of nature, a human being, a great ape, if you will. Here's two more. This one says, the dawn's pink lotus petals now expand, portals on opening to the true pure land. And when you see some of these works of art, some of these paintings, people are being reborn in these lotus flowers on this lake. And in fact, if you look at the so-called Rego paintings, which I love, even though they're not formally part of the doctrinal narrative within Shin Buddhism or True Pure Land Buddhism, but within the Jodoshu or Pure Land sect, these Rego paintings were very popular, where what you see is, as the person is dying, you see Amida and his entourage coming down from the mountains, and leading the entourage is Kuan Yin, Avalokiteshvara, with a lotus blossom in her hand or in his hand, and he's bringing it down to the dying person, so that when the person does pass away, they are reborn, so to speak, into that lotus blossom. But I'll end with this one, and this is one of my favorites. And I'll have to ask you to go back and get a copy of the book and read through it to find out who the poets were on these. I don't have them notated here, and I regret that, and I apologize for it. But I love this one. A moonlit night. We few assorted cranks, fogies, and half-wits call the name with thanks. A buddy of mine, Ray, who makes comments on my channel and we email back and forth, he refers to himself as a ragamuffin. Shinran referred to himself, I think, as Gotoku, which means bald-headed one. But I like this idea of a few assorted cranks, fogies, and half-wits. So there's a colon there after the words, a moonlit night. We few assorted cranks, fogies, and half-wits call the name with thanks. And thanks or gratitude is the ultimate sentiment that we are expressing through our reciting the name Namo Amida Butsu. It's gratitude for the vow that Dharmakara made, the fact that he was able to fulfill it, and that by virtue of that vow, we are embraced by Amida Buddha, never to be forsaken. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.